Yet again, one final thing I keep on thinking of other ones to mention. There's a systems dynamics group run out of the University of Worcester, Worcester Polytechnic, by a guy called Mike Radzicki. Also a guy called Dave Wheat, W-H-E-A-T, who's based at the University of Oslo, and of course the whole Forrester group at MIT. Those, I think, are the foundation of which we could build an engineering-based economic that we desperately needed.
Well, I do believe that's good advice, and as an engineer who actually went and got an MBA, I have to tell you, one of the first things I had to relearn was that the dependent and independent axes are reversed for the economics crowd. But
it's nonsense. That. Yeah, well, if I manage to survive it, it's nonsense. And one thing I've done is, apart from the work I do on finance, in Chapter 4 of my book, Debunking Economics, is titled Size Does Matter. I had a lot of fun with chapter titles in the book. Yeah. And that was the whole obsession, neoclassical economists. The school that dominates economics is called neoclassical economics. It's a particular religious belief dressed up in mathematical terms. It is not a sound analysis of a capitalist economy at all. But they have this idea about competition is better than monopoly. And part of that argument goes, you would have done with your MBA, you have a downward sloping market demand curve, so they've got actually the wrong way round, but they show demand falling as price, or demand rising as price falls, given the way they draw the curves, right. And then supply being a rising function as price rises, so does supply. And then they say in a perfect market, everything happens where the two curves cross. That importance, right. They're intersecting straight lines. But they then show you during monopoly, there's a third line called marginal revenue, and the intersection of marginal revenue with the supply, with so-called supply curve, is what determines output for the monopoly. So you have the competition you get where the two curves cross, monopoly you get where another curve crosses, and then you draw up to the price line to work out what the price should be, and you show monopoly is worse than competition, and we're better off with competitive firms, blah, blah, blah. The mathematics is crap. Simple basic idea behind it, they've mistaken infinitesimal for zero. What they argue is that the individual competitive firm sees a horizontal demand curve. Now that's saying that quantity, you can change the quantity of a single firm by the amount of 1,000 units, let's say, and have no impact on market price. But at the same time, they're arguing that if the total quantity produced on the market grows by 1,000 units, price will fall. I've gone through the logical conundrum, and the mathematics is nonsense. Yes. They have a different theory which isn't so bad, but it actually only works if you can actually model competition as a one-off shot. They call the Korno-Nash game theoretic solution. So I pull that all apart in a couple of articles in Physica A. I can't get it published in straight economics journals, but I get it published in non-orthodox economics journals and physics journals and so on. So the whole foundations, right from the whole idea of supply and demand, is bad mathematics, and it's time we just got rid of them.
Well, I appreciate your insights, Doctor. And again, in the interest of educating our engineer readers, I did want to mention again your book, Debunking Economics, The Naked Emperor of the Social Sciences. And I recommend that engineers read this book. Any engineer who aspires to be among the next generation of engineer capitalists should get this for their library. And knowledge is power. And you can find Dr. Keene's blog at www.debtdeflation.com. And when I was there, I saw that you were working on a new book to be titled Finance and Economic Breakdown. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
It's putting the models of Hermann Minsky, who's the person who we now regard as the person who understood how capitalism functions properly and pointed out the danger of letting the financial system take over, putting his models into mathematical form and then trying to make them accessible for the general reader, plus expanding them dramatically. So I combine Minsky's views of what he calls financial instability with the work of a group called the circuit theorists who emanate mainly from Italy and France, about how money is actually created within the economy. So rather than living in what's called a fractional reserve system, the actual creation of money is the reverse. The financial system creates the loans and the deposits simultaneously, first of all, goes looking for reserves if they need them later, and most of the reserve systems will leak like a sieve. The American system is a classic instance of that. You have a so-called 10% reserve ratio, but in fact it only applies to household deposits. There's no rule like that at all on corporate deposits and no rule on euro currency transfers and so on. So I combine that to give you a genuinely monetary model of the economy. and then I'm trying to make it something which is accessible to the general reader. So I've worked out a tabular way of building systems of coupled differential equations that describe financial systems. And that at the end of that, I'm now building a multi-sectoral model. So economists have failed to build a model that shows the input-output nature of production in a dynamic sense. Ironically, it's because they excluded two of the most essential aspects of capitalism, being the fact that it's a monetary system and that things take time. So they try to have a monetary system where everything happens in equilibrium, and they could never get it to work. I've managed to make a multi-sectoral dynamic monetary model work quite successfully. But that's the hairy end, and at that end I would much appreciate some assistance from engineers in advancing the modelling, because I think that's this type of non-linear, dynamic, non-equilibrium modelling is what we need to model how the capital system actually functions. And in closing, I'll say one thing about capitalism. I'm both a critic and a fan. And the worst people you can have are people that are simply fans of your system, which is where the neoclassicals come in, because they eulogize. They tell you basically you're King Canute who can stop the tides coming in and so on. And that's what gave us this catastrophe in the first place. So what we read, above all else, is a break from ideology and a move to realism in how we analyse the economy. And on that front, I have more faith in engineers than virtually any other professional group on the planet.
Well, typically they are problem solvers, and the ones that I've had the chance to meet are usually motivated by making the world a better place. So maybe we can work together. And,
I'd appreciate that.
Doctor, I thank you very much for your insights and being with us here today on Engineer.net.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're most welcome.